Hello everyone, and welcome back to Wolf for Programming. Today I want to show off a little Rust web development starter pack. Lately I've noticed that web development in Rust has gotten very easy to work with. For one, the debuggers in Visual Studio Code have gotten very good. It's now very easy to hit breakpoints even in async code. So, I've set up a little project here that has everything you need to get started with Rust web development. And I've got a little bit of an architecture diagram here to go over some of the technologies that are used in this video to make it very easy to understand. For our persistence layer, we're going to use Postgres, and that's going to be running in a Docker container. And to administer all the Postgres needs, we're going to have pgadmin. So we're not actually going to be changing the code of pgadmin. That's just there so that we can run queries directly against Postgres in a nice UI. And that's going to be in its own Docker container. Finally, we're going to have a development app, our Rust app, and that's going to be in a Docker container. And that's going to be running Arch Linux, and it's going to install all of our development dependencies for us, so that you don't have to do anything but type docker compose up in the terminal, install an add-on in vscode, and hook right into your development container. So those are our 3 Docker containers, which will be orchestrated by docker compose. The IDE we're going to use is going to be Visual Studio Code. And I can already hear some people saying, that's a text editor. But for our use case, it is definitely going to be an IDE because it installs all the debugging tools for you automatically, and that's done in a hidden file in a .vscode folder in the project included for you. So some of the technologies that we're going to use in the starter pack is going to be Rust as the main programming language. We're going to use Diesel as the ORM, so that's going to be doing all of our interaction with Postgres is going to be done through Diesel. And a lot of people like to use raw SQL, and I do like raw SQL because at the end of the day, you really are writing SQL, and I don't like that some of these layers hide that. However, Diesel offers a lot of things that we would have to write anyway. For example, a migration strategy. When I write raw SQL in web projects, I end up having to write a very similar migration strategy that Diesel has for us. And so I've included Diesel by default. And we're just going to be doing some simple things right now. Now, because this is going to be completely server-side rendered in Rust, we're going to use Terra, which is the HTML templating engine. And it's very similar to the Django, I think, is where it got its inspiration from. So this video is not going to cover the benefits of a server-side rendered HTML versus a single-page application. I can go ahead and tell you my opinion is that single-page applications have a very small niche and probably shouldn't be used as much as they are, but I think that's for another video. So again, Diesel is going to be interacting with Postgres and our IDE VS Code with the remote development plugin. And the reason I suggest doing this is you could do this all in the terminal, and maybe inside of your Rust container you could install Vim or Emacs and do it that way. But this is going to install all the plugins necessary to get straight to debugging Rust. So I highly suggest you get a start with VS Code. That way you can really think about your application logic and programming and not about the tools, right? And that's one of the benefits I think of Rust, in the last really year or two, is that all the development tools have really gotten good. And so now it's a really good programming language to work in. First, something as high level as web development. And of course, Docker and Docker Compose. And what those are going to do is document and automate all of our dependencies for us. So you could do it without those things, but for any computer with more than like 6 gigabytes of RAM, I definitely suggest just doing everything in Docker containers because it makes life a whole lot easier. Okay, so now that's the architecture. Let's go ahead and show you what I've got going here. So I've split up the project into a few different things, and it's kind of reminiscent of a model view controller. We've got a CRUD layer, we've got a template logic layer, we've got some view models, and these are basically objects that will be passed into the HTML. We've got a templates folder, And we have a registration page that will then create a user for us. And you see here we have the use of templates so that we can pass Rust variables to it. And so I got this partially from ActiX's examples page, but they had a SQLite example, so I had to do a little bit extra to get Postgres to work. And so hopefully this starter pack can go a little bit extra further to get you creating a Rust web app quickly. Okay, so let's go ahead and start in the beginning. We're going to do a docker compose up, and the docker compose file is in the docker folder and the development folder. And the reason I have a development subfolder is that as the app gets larger, you might want a production folder, so the containers might look a little bit different. But for now, let's just go ahead and up the Docker container. And what that's actually going to do is bring up a sleeping container. And you see here the final step in that container is sleep for infinity, so that we can then attach to that container and do our development in. And in Visual Studio Code, here is the remote containers plugin, and we can just click reopen in container. And I've showed this in some older videos in C++. Now we are in our Rust container. Really cool stuff. And you see here we have this configuration file that specifies a bunch of add-ons, extensions that will automatically be downloaded for you, and those have already been done. So you can see we can build our Rust project, cargo build. That's the cargo build command. And if you look in our cargo file, you can get all the dependencies that it's pulling down. So here we could type cargo run to get the app started, but first I want to talk a little bit about Diesel migrations. So before you start with the Diesel project, you want to check out the Diesel Getting Started guide. But in general, after you create a migration, and I have one example migration here, which creates a user table, you'll want to run Diesel run migration. And in this development project, I actually already have Rust and Diesel installed for you. And because our password is specified as an environment variable that we can auto connect to the Postgres database. So for starting the project, we actually have some executables here. So we have some unit test, and I think I still have an older name in here. That's fine. We're going to go ahead and do debug executable spatial learning. That's kind of a side project I was basing this off of. And there's going to be some compiler warnings because I haven't gotten everything perfect. And so now we're actually, can I disable address space? So now we're actually in our, running our Rust app. Oops. This is me starting in the beginning. And here we have Rust web app development. So we can click to register and we can create a username. And this is all done with the debugger. Actually, let's see if we can hit a breakpoint. I haven't tested this in a while. Let's go to the register and let's hit a breakpoint right there. We're going to hit that, and we hit our breakpoint. Oops, I don't want to start a new one, I want to continue. Check it out. And so in our backend, our Rust detected that nothing was here, and so it returned a bunch of error messages. And you can see in our templates, we have some conditional error messages here. Actually, the message is returned in this object here. No, in the models, the view models, right? And I have some unit test here that you can trigger either right here in vscode, or you could even do it in the debugger up here. So let's actually go through with creating a user. We're going to remove that breakpoint first. At least I want to. Okay, we're going to create a user called Wolfer. We're going to give him wolfer@gmail.com. Just some generic password. Password 123. Password 123. It created it in the database and sent us to a registration success page. And I don't have the login logic built out yet, but here we have a query. I can go ahead and trigger. Actually, I think I need to relog in here because I deleted this. Okay, so we have to get the we have to get the login details for pjadmin, and that's going to be in the Docker compose file. And so if we go over to pjadmin, we've got a generic username and password. And the first time we have to actually create the server to connect to, and we're just going to name it postgres. Postgres, the username over here at Postgres is user, and the password is password. Make sure you change that before you do anything in production. We see we have our Rust Web Dev database. If we check out the schema, we see that we have a table of users. We see we have a hash password. Remember, you always want to store hash passwords in databases, and that's a security thing because sometimes a database is leaked and you don't. You also want your users to feel confident that you don't know their password. Isn't that cool? So here's a starter pack that can get you started with Rust web development. It's got all your debugging tools right here ready. It's got some unit tests set up, a very simple function. It creates a user, and you might need that for any number of projects. I'm going to build something bigger off this, and maybe it'll be revenue generating, maybe it'll just be for fun. That's all I got for you guys today. Let me know what you think. Do you like this kind of content? Is this something you want to see more of? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Any suggestions, any ideas, anything else you want to see. And yeah, that's all I got. Have a good day.